Jenny Farrar-DeWatt, and I am the Chair of the Southern Government Women's Network. It is my pleasure to welcome you here this afternoon to our panel discussion on accessibility. I would like to open our session with a karakia. Tu tawa mai I runga, tu tawa mai I raro, tu tawa mai I roto, tu tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mori tū, te mori ora, ki te katoa, huie, tae. I summon from above, from below, from within, from the surrounding environment, the universal vitality and energy to infuse and enrich all present, unified, connected, and blessed. The latest statistics I could find on people reporting disabilities was 2013, where an estimated 1.1 New Zealanders reported a disability, which at that time was 24% of the total population. I understand that now it is still at 25%. We'd like to acknowledge that it is Sign Language Week this week. The United Nations Conventions on Rights of Persons with Disabilities created a framework that has helped to shape what the government and disabled people aspire to. These include respect and dignity, full participation, autonomy, inclusion, accessibility, equality. The United Nations also included a very thought-provoking definition. Disability is an evolving concept, and the disability results from the interaction between persons with impairments and attitudinal and environmental barriers that hinders full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with others. I would like to hand over to Jennifer Lay, Southern Government Women's Network Deputy Chair, who will introduce our panel members.
Kia ora koutou, thanks Jenny. And we're coming to you this afternoon from the Whiki building at the University of Canterbury and from the Ako Aotearoa offices. It's my pleasure to warmly welcome our panel today and thank them immediately for coming in out of the rain. And so I'd like to start here on my right first, and Neve Soryl will talk shortly about her experiences. But Neve is studying towards a Bachelor of Social Work Honours, and she's currently a connector or kai tūhono at Enabling Good Lives here in Christchurch. At Enabling Good Lives, Neve works with young people with disabilities and their whānau. Next to Neve is our Southern Government Women's Network Committee member, and that is Jacqui Francis. And Jacqui has spent 7 years working as a senior advisor, customer experience for business improvement and innovation at New Zealand Customs. So Jacqui will start our questions off shortly with talking about her experiences with disability. And next to her at the end of the table, we welcome the Chief Executive from Disabled Persons Assembly, Prudence Walker. Prudence is an experienced facilitator with a history of working with young people, disabled people and people who are migrants, as well as the general community. So you can see we have a rich group of experienced women to share with you today some ideas around accessibility to support you in being as accessible as possible in your communities around Aotearoa. As I said, we'll start our questions this afternoon first with Jacqui, but just while I'm talking about questions, remember if you do have a question, please write it in the chat because we will be monitoring the chat, and so we'll look at those throughout the session. So Jacqui, to start our afternoon, would you please give us a sense of how your disability has impacted on your life? Thanks, Jacqui.
Thank you. So I have an invisible disability, having had a brain injury in 2018. It resulted as in having an aneurysm and a stroke. I had my hidden disability become part of my new life. I had to retrain and relearn, starting from the age of 5 and learn lots of different old skills and many new skills. I have a learning disability. I continue to use my multiple cognitive strategies to ensure that I'm understood and I'm understanding, and I retain information, and particularly when it's new learnings. My hidden disability is not a physical disability, but I have reinvented my world. I have fatigue, I have cognitive challenges, and I have to work twice as hard, and I need to pause, ask, and listen in order to fit the norm. My disability is obviously not obviously to spot, and at times my disability may be overlooked and misinterpreted. I have so much to offer, and I have had a lot of support from many government agencies, from retraining my brain. Obviously, the Canterbury District Health Board taught me how to read and write and understand, walking, talking, and motivating. And then I moved on to returning to work. There's challenges, and so I partnered with Customs, the all of Government Disability Network, and the Southern Women Network. This has helped me to achieve my goals so far. I've still got plenty to learn and understand, and there's much about invisible disability that we need to learn and understand. I think I'll pass that on to you now.
Yes. So thank you very much, Jacqui. And already I've written down some tips to myself to remember. You know, I like your approach around pause, ask, and listen. So taking that time with talking to people. So thank you for your courage and honesty and sharing your journey with us. And as you said, yes, Prudence can follow that with how her experience has been too. It may be the same, it may be different, but happy for you to share with us. Thank you, Prudence.
Kia ora. Yeah, I guess in impairment terms, then Jacqui and I have quite a few similarities, both having had brain injuries. So I also experience all the things that she talked about experiencing, fatigue, specific learning disabilities or cognitive process things, memory, recall, concentration issues. And I also, one of my brain injuries also affected me physically. So I have a right-sided muscle weakness. I guess the difference for me is a couple of things. One is that I was a teenager when I had my brain injuries. And so that was over 20 years ago. And so I've now lived more of my life as a disabled person than I lived not being a disabled person. And the usual process, I suppose, from adolescence to adulthood has been affected by the acquiring my impairments. So I was at high school when I first acquired my impairments, and that affected my learning and therefore my exam results. I was also very capable in maths, and I could not do any maths anymore. And so that kind of affected my or impacted on my focus transitioning out of school and into the workforce, because before I was going to pursue something related to maths and go to university in that regard, and, you know, be a statistician or an engineer or something, but I could no longer do maths. And so that shifted my focus really into more people orientated. That's kind of my personality anyway, had been along the analytical lines and the people stuff, but it's meant that I really had to leave the maths and that behind and concentrate on the people stuff more. So, you know, as a young person starting out in terms of working and everything, originally I started studying hotel management, and of course hospitality is quite a physical workforce, and I had already started that when I acquired the physical impairment, which then meant that I couldn't carry plates in a restaurant anymore, and so struggled for quite a while with jobs that really were beyond my physical capability, but built on, I was trying to position myself into a place where I didn't have to do those roles anymore and I could make it easier on my impairments. So I guess over the years, like I say, that's been more than 20 years and I still don't have it all figured out. And our impairments, I'm sure Jacqui, you know, experiences her impairments different on a daily basis as well. So it's not consistently the same. So we're always having to change our approach and try and predict how things might be. I also walk the line, that's probably not the right term to use in this regard, but between visible and non-visible, because as I've aged, it's not that my impairments have changed necessarily, but I've taken different approaches to managing them or thought about the longevity of my life as it will be, hopefully, and how I can sustain myself throughout. So, you know, today I'm using a arm crutch to walk up here, but often I am using a mobility scooter or around home, or for short distances, I won't be using anything. So I've become more visible over the time that I've had my impairments, and that's really interesting, both kind of in positive and negative ways, because you can't, I guess when you have an impairment that is not obvious, then you can pass as a non-disabled person often, but that's not necessarily a good thing. And likewise, actually, I find sometimes things are easier when I'm using my mobility scooter because people are more aware that I have a need.
Thanks very much, Prudence. Gosh, I really appreciate you sharing the realities of your life as well, and taking us back to what it was like for you as a younger person, and then telling us about the shifts that you've had to make as you age. Or as we all age, we all make shifts, but I mean, I found that particularly pertinent, how you're very conscious of changing your approach with the realities of your disability. I see that there was a question on the chat, something about advice, and we certainly are going to follow up on that, but I'll just let Neve talk briefly, and then we will talk in the open panel about the opportunities, and the full panel about advice, because I really understand that that's often what we want, is how best to work with our colleagues who have disabilities. So Neve, as I said earlier, you're working for Enabling Good Lives, and so your perspective will be slightly different, but very valued. And what I was wondering if you could share with us is what do you think people need to be aware of regarding disabilities in the workplace? Thanks, Neve.
So as Jennifer mentioned, in my role at Enabling Good Lives, I work with young people who are often transitioning out of school, who are always funded and thinking about what a good life might look like for them and what they want for their future. So we work with a range of disabilities. I work with quite a few people with learning or intellectual disabilities. And part of that discussion is what do they want from their life? And quite similar to other young people, they want often to go flatting, to have a relationship, to be part of their community and to get a job. And getting a job is a huge thing we look at that can be really challenging. Of the 28 young people I work with, I would say about 20 are actively looking for jobs, and so they've done some really cool things with doing work experience, gaining lots of skills at school, connecting with employment support agencies, developing CVs, approaching businesses. So they're really trying hard because it is a really important part of their life. But of those 20 young people I'm working with who are really wanting a job, not one of them has a job. And it's something I find really frustrating because I know how much value they could bring to a workplace. And, they have the most amazing attitudes. They're really willing to learn. They're capable, they're passionate, and they bring a whole lot of value to everyone around them and to a workplace. And so I guess what I want people to be aware of is that people with disabilities can bring a lot of value and can be a real asset to the workplace, and so to give them a chance.
Thank you. I can sense the passion and frustration for you, Neve, when you're working with the 20 young people you do, and how disappointing it is to hear that actually so few of them can get a job and yet they can offer so much. And perhaps that's what Jacqui and Prudence might want to add to our conversation too. Jenny, did you have a question from the chat?
Yes, you've talked about your disabilities. Hannah has asked, do each of you call yourselves disabled? And if so, in what areas?
I can talk a whole lot about this. I'm just giving you guys a chance.
I think because obviously, I do have a disability, and I think that in 2018 it transformed my life. I think that the important thing is to recognise that it's okay to be disabled, and maybe the name disabled is not particularly enlightening, but it's real and we have to accept it, that's part of us moving forward. I don't want to put any pressure on myself because it's hard to meet other people's expectations. So I think that it's important that if we can break the barrier to acknowledge I have a disability, I think that you'll all agree that it's going to enable others to maybe if we can find a different meaning for a disability.
That's a good point, Jacqui. Thank you for that. What would you like to add, Prudence?
I'm wondering if Neve has anything to...
Well, I don't identify as having a disability. I do have dyslexia and dysgraphia, and that does impact on my work and my life. But I think when I think about the social model of disability being, I guess, what disables you. And I'm really lucky that I have really great strategies and accommodations at work. I use voice-activated software. And so my dyslexia and dysgraphia doesn't disable me because of those strategies. And so I guess because of that, I don't identify as having a disability, but say I've got a brother who's got quite severe dyslexia and among other disabilities, but I think he would identify as having a disability because it does disable him, if that makes sense.
That makes sense, and that's great for sharing. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's all about your strategies and support at work too. Yeah,
I think for me, so thanks for mentioning the social model, Neve. I subscribe to the social model of disability, and that is very much about society. So I don't, there's language is a very tricky thing, and there's lots of different perspectives on language, but I don't say that I've got a disability. I say that I have an impairment, and I am disabled. So in the social model context, for those people who are not aware of the social model of disability, that means that actually it's when I try and interact with society, a society that doesn't think of me when designing everything, that I am then disabled. So when I say I'm a disabled woman, that's a identity thing, that I am kind of at a population level, I guess, identifying myself with a group of people. I don't think that I'm inadequate because I'm disabled. That's an identity thing. And yes, I have impairments, and actually, like, disability is not a bad word like we've been led to believe. Look up Stella Young TED Talk on that issue.
Good, things to follow up with. Right, so Stella Young TED Talk. Great, thank you.
I'm not your inspiration.
Yeah, heard of her, yeah. And thanks very much for giving us a background there to the theoretical model there, Neve and Prudence. And yeah, I really like your approach by saying you feel like you're not inadequate. And I think a lot of us can take notice of that and work with that, I think, in our own context. So that's been really helpful already. So I know many of you are keen to know also what we can do, and one of the questions that we have posed to the panel this afternoon is, how do you think networks at work can help people? So who would like to answer that first?
So I guess maybe like my context is not a government context, but I have been involved in a staff network for disabled people when I worked for 11 years for CCS Disability Action. So obviously a organisation that is in the disability sector. And even in that context, being able to connect with people who have similar experiences to what you do, and just around that identity thing as well is really powerful, and there is more support in that, and disabled people in general tend to can internalize a whole lot and feel like they're the only person with this experience or whose impairments are not understood. So to be able to, in that collective environment, connect with others and realise that you're not the only one who experiences things like that, and just build that support and strength around each other.
Thanks, Prudence.
Yeah, I think also networks give you the ability to have resources that can focus on your career development. I think that, first of all, people need to walk in our shoes and stand beside us and help us to learn and understand. I think they give us a greater strength to build our confidence and share ideas. Just it doesn't necessarily always have to be around jobs. It can also be social interaction, which plays a big part, because often, after COVID, we were all locked in our own rooms, and that social interaction is incredibly important for someone who's changing their way of thinking.
It's an interesting point, because I've had lots of discussions with the young people I work with about why they want to work, what a great workplace would look like for them, and something that comes up is that sense of belonging and connection with others and involvement in the community. And I think that's massive, really important part of work, especially for the group of people I work with who can be sometimes isolated or put in special environments. Yeah, and so actually having that interaction and meeting others is really important.
Yeah, hugely.
And thanks for touching on the different aspects, not just in the workplace, as you say, but the social aspect of life too. I think really key. So thanks, some great ideas here and good advice there. I think we had another question from the chat that we'll look at now. Thanks, Jenny.
Yep, I'd just like to acknowledge that that first question that was asked was actually from Stuart.
Oh, right.
Thank you for asking that. Also, there was a message from I. Hoffman to Prue. The comment was great to own it and be proud. And the question from Hannah kind of follows on from what you were discussing. Do any of you have advice for people who have colleagues with invisible disabilities about how best to support them?
I think so. I work with the most amazing team at EGR Christchurch, and I have a lot of colleagues with disabilities, and the thing I've learnt is to ask. So say, what can we do? How can I support you? What do I need to be aware of? So an example might be if I'm doing a presentation in a team meeting, I need to make sure I ask, what size font do you need your printouts? And, you know, I've got a colleague who has sign language interpreters in our meetings. What do I need to make it easier for the interpreters? Do I need to speak slower? Do I need to give some information beforehand so they have an idea of what we're talking about? And so just asking what they need. And from my experience, people I work with and young people I work with disabilities are really good at telling you what they need and how you can support them.
That's so simple, Neve, and yet I think I'm aware that I may be reluctant sometimes to do that, and I'm sure there are others too that feel that, and yet it's so powerful, isn't it, because you're involving the person to take responsibility and share what it is they need. So thank you. Yeah, anything more to add, Prudence and Jacqui?
And I think I also look at the top-down approach. Top-down approach drives compliance, but not necessarily commitment. So I think everyone must see and understand their role to play to create a culture, a different culture, that a unique culture. Obviously, for my hidden disability, it's about who we are and why we're here, and what can we play, and what can we introduce something to others.
Thank you.
Yeah, it depends on what your role is, building on what you're saying. You know, if you're in a managerial role, that's a bit different to just simply being a colleague. But I think, just to support what Neve and Jacqui both had to say about, it's about, seeing what you can do to support people, but not in a overbearing way, offers of support perhaps, and taking the time to understand how people do things, and being like genuinely supportive and encouraging, because I know, I speak for myself when I say that, sometimes we can not accept, we're so used to not having our needs met that sometimes when people genuinely do want to support us, we kind of dismiss the offer of help sometimes, or have a very I can do it myself approach. Well, I'm speaking for myself. And so it can actually be difficult to sort of accept support, but also the culture really matters around, is it safe to do that, and how does the culture support that? And if you disclose things like what's going to be done with that information, at DPA, over 85% of our staff are disabled people. So it's just kind of like our culture is just thinking of everybody's needs. But, I think in general, if workplaces think more flexibly about how tasks can be achieved and how we can work flexibly, and we've had an introduction to that in the last year with COVID, people always said, no, we can't work from home, we can't do things flexibly, and all of a sudden we all can, when the whole population needs that. But disabled people have been saying that forever about those accommodations. So it's thinking outside the square a bit, and providing flexibility often supports a wider range of people's needs.
Gosh, thank you for that. And yeah, thanks for reminding us how the world has changed in good ways thanks to COVID too. It does touch on, though, what you were saying there, Prudence, about the difficulties and, that feeling and sense of not feeling safe. And I just want to shift our focus to thinking now about the biases and perhaps the unconscious biases that you've experienced. And whilst that's a negative issue, I think sometimes I know I can learn from things that other people have done that aren't appropriate. I can learn and take it on as a new response. So feel free to share about the things you don't like and the unconscious bias that you've witnessed or have received yourself in the past.
Well, I think with the young people I'm working with, it's really challenging with unconscious bias can be a huge barrier, but thinking of employment, an example that I think really clearly shows unconscious bias is I'm working with a young person who's blind and his disability isn't clear to employers until he's at the interview, and he gets lots of interviews for jobs, but he's never once had a job. Whereas I have another young person who has a communication challenges, and so in her application she has to say that she can't talk over the phone, and she doesn't even get interviews. And I think that's a really clear example of when the employer realises a disability, that's when the barriers start. And I think that's something that really needs a lot of work on.
Jacqui. Thanks, Neve.
I was just thinking about that, and I think because I prefer to choose, prejudice is just an opinion, really, and it's unsupported judgment of someone. And fortunately, unconscious bias is becoming more understanding. You're a wider focus into the workplace and understand what actually unconscious biasness is. I think I prefer to choose it inclusion. I like to not talk about unconscious bias too much, but I like to say and describe inclusion, and that's a whole organisation. And there's no barrier to inclusion. Everybody will want to be included.
I like that way you flipped that. Thanks, Jacqui. And anything more to add, Prudence?
I did workshops around this stuff for years, but when I attended a workshop myself years ago about unconscious bias, the thing I took away from that is that we all have bias. And, the unconscious bias is kind of when it sits back here and we don't pay any attention to it. But if we bring our biases to the front and actually challenge ourselves on that, so that's the one thing that's really stuck with me. And I think, sometimes we hear people say, oh, no, I don't have any biases, like I include all people. And that's not very realistic, because realistically, like we all have been brought up in certain ways or have different cultural influences on us. And so we all have biases, but to acknowledge those and to think about how they might impact on our way of thinking around disability and around disabled people in the context of the workplace, how actually even our unconscious biases about work and how it should happen, I think can have a real impact in the workplace. I don't fit the mould of anything. Like I'm a mobility scooter riding pig head under 40 woman who's a chief executive of a not-for-profit organisation. But I guess in terms of unconscious bias, yeah, I see it around disability all the time. But in my own personal experience, before I had kind of noticed what I was experiencing around disability, I suppose, I had actually experienced a lot as a young person and as a woman. And so that does influence how I then experience everything going forward from that. And so that's where the comment of I don't fit the mould comes from, really, because it started being in a leadership position at a young age and not fitting the mould. And so let's just keep going with that theme.
Well, it's great. Great not fitting the mould. Celebrate that. Celebrate you three. It is, did you want to say?
I think that, you know, when you first have you know, obviously for me, I'm new to this, you are being asked to fit a box that's you're not comfortable with. And so I celebrate with you because I love the fact that I choose not to engage that box or open Pandora's, I say.
But I think probably on a maybe perhaps more serious note is realising the impacts that unconscious bias can have on other people and in the workplace. Like, you know, we're all here today with a reasonable amount of confidence and everything to speak about these issues, but that's not everybody's experience. And I touched on internalized stuff before. And, you know, that is stuff that disabled people face every day in every part of their lives. So I guess the key for, you know, allies or people who want to be allies is to ask, actually, what is my bias in this and how can I unpack some of that so that the people around me are less impacted by that.
Thank you, Rue. Gosh, there's some great wisdom here, and I really thank you three so much for your time and for sharing so openly your wisdom about what we can all do in the name of accessibility in our workplace. We are coming to the end, so I'm going to ask a question shortly for the panel, but we do have some more chat questions. So
yes, I did read, talking about employment, I did read that able New Zealanders there's 78% of adults in full-time employment, as opposed to 48% of those that report a disability. So that all echoes the comments you've made. We did have a question in the chat around that. Are there statistics regarding employees being negative about people disclosing their hidden disability and all of a sudden being treated less favourably?
No.
The person that's asking this is saying, I'm not out at work as disabled as I'm worried it would have a detrimental consequences. Whereas when I worked in the UK, I was safe to be out because I knew I had rights that had been respected. And I've got the impression that over 2 years in New Zealand that the law sounds the same, but its application isn't that strong.
So there's two things in there. One is we're not good at collecting data around disability. So I doubt data exists on that, or if it is, maybe very small studies. The other thing is that you should join the Disabled Persons Assembly of New Zealand. Remember, because we are, as a disabled persons organisation, and there are 7 in the country, the government has an obligation to consult with us under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So from that rights perspective, there's strength built in that area, and it's kind of the connecting with other people thing that we heard before, totally. I feel like this is a much bigger conversation, but you know, I'm sorry that you feel that way, and I would encourage you to get what you need to connect in the way you need, probably outside work, to be able to make that different experience for you.
And I think there's some great websites that will help this person identify some of the concerns that have. We do have some statistics, but they're reasonably old, and I think a lot is driven fear of retribution, and I think it's important for us. Let us know if we can help in any way, shape, and form. It's important that we start unlocking that box.
I see that. Thank you for your answers. Yeah, thank you both. Anything to add, Neve?
No, they've covered it perfectly.
So, Jenny, is there another question there from chat? Thanks, everyone, for asking questions.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, we have a number of questions coming through, and as Jennifer said, that the time may not permit us to ask all the questions. However, any unanswered questions will be answered and shared on our website.
Great, that's good to know, because yes, we do need to be mindful of your time.
Yeah.
Thanks.
A question from Claire. What message would panel give about identity in a workplace with regard to being seen as a woman or female, identifying the people first, not the disability?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question? I'm trying to get my head around it.
How you identify in the workplace. Some people might identify as a disabled person. What Claire's saying is, do you identify first as being, I'm a woman, I'm a female, this is who I am, rather than the disability coming out as an identity?
I actually think both. So I have both. I am a woman with a disability, but first and foremost, it's about what I can gain from it, but also what my organisation can gain from it. So they will look, obviously within a role, we have to identify what those roles and skills are about. And so skills is obviously, I have some skills, but I also have a disability. And so try and connecting them to explain yourself is quite hard and challenging.
I mean, I think identity is a real individual thing and individual journey, and whatever things make up that for people. And it's contextual as well, like, this being coming along and being on this panel today for a women's network, then I'm more conscious of that part of my identity, just because of the context of it. And I've heard some people, talk about that they don't acknowledge different parts of their identity because they have so many, intersectionalities, if you like. So I think some people make the most of all of that, and also, in a work context, apply it to, when applying for a job, apply it to the application of that and say, I am these things and this is what it means for what I can contribute in the workplace. I don't know if Neve has other thoughts.
I think from my perspective, working with people with disabilities, I'm really conscious to mirror how they identify themselves. And so if I have working with somebody, so for example, I've got somebody who identifies as having, she calls it learning problems. And so I'm not going to come in and say intellectual disability because that's not how she identifies. And so really being conscious of how the individual identifies and what they identify with, and respecting that and mirroring their language is really important.
Gosh, that's a complex issue, but a really lovely, simple response. I love that mirroring idea. And Claire Ryan, thank you, has said great responses, thanks. And I would like to invite the panel to really end on a strengths-based and mana-enhancing way and share with us, I guess what's been so important, what is important to you in your life, and what, do you have a piece of advice that you'd like to share with people in their workplaces? So some of your strengths that you bring, 2 questions together, but I guess essentially I want you to, to end with saying, this is my life and this is how it is for people with disabilities. So would you like to start, Neve?
Just need a minute to think about it.
Oh, you need, yeah, because it was complex, sorry. Any advice to give or things that have been good about your life?
I'll just say that I think a positive attitude is really important. Creating not just my positive attitude, but also hoping that it creates a positive work environment. I obviously see problems as a challenge instead of an option, but it's an opportunity, and I just count my blessings and listen to others in order to get some coaching and mentoring from them, and maybe we can provide them some coaching and mentoring.
Great. Thank you. I really like your answer and mentioning the concept of coaching and mentoring. Yeah, working together. Any further comments to add?
So I guess in a similar vein, like I would say that, for us all, I'm sure that when people believe in you, it makes it so much easier to navigate or to aim for where you want to get to, I guess, even if there is a whole lot of challenges on the way, when you've got that support and you've got people that believe in you. See what people have to offer and believe in that. And that will, I think that means that people can bring all of who they are to a workplace.
Nice.
And I think I'll just add, be kind. And so be kind to your colleagues, to, members of the community, whoever you work with, because I think be kind and question yourself, ask why when you think something that isn't, might not, what's the word? If you question, I think questioning yourself is really important, and not just to take things for granted, but be kind and question yourself is what I think I try and do.
Thank you, Neve. And that's a lovely note to end on for all of us, I'm sure. And I just want to thank the people who have sent in questions on chat. As Jenny said earlier, your questions will be answered on the website. But thank you again. I'm going to hand over to Kirsty now, who's going to offer thanks on behalf of Southern Government Women. But lovely note to end on is being kind, and that reflective question there, thinking about our own selves. Thanks, Kirsty.
Hi, thank you for that. I'd just like to make a point that the session has been recorded and it will be made available on our next newsletter or whenever it's available. So do keep an eye in your email inboxes for that. You'll be able to watch it through. If there's anything that you didn't catch, it will be made available. So thank you so much to our 3 wonderful panellists. We've got Prudence Walker, Jacqui Francis and Neve Soryl, and also to Jennifer for expertingly guiding the session. So thank you so much. Thank you to the panellists for your honesty and for sharing your truths and for helping us get a better understanding of the issues that you face day to day. It's been really insightful, and I'm sure we've all learned some valuable lessons on how we can adapt our own personal and work bubbles to try and hopefully make it more inclusive and to improve accessibility around these issues. So thank you so much. So I'll just end on a karakia. So I'll just join with me if you have it in front of you. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa, ko Namu te moana, hei o horahi, matatu I te rangi, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātu ia tātu katoa, humi hui tai. May peace be widespread. May the sea be like greenstone, a pathway for us all this day. Let us show compassion and respect for each other, unified, connected and blessed. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.